Hello and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. And we'd like to wish a blessed Yom Kippur to those who are observing today. I'm Mindy Wright, a member of CMC's Board of Trustees and director of the nonprofit Higher Ed Alliance. I'm really happy to see everybody here today. Today, CMC is brought to us with the support of the Greater Columbus Arts Council and Puffin Foundation West, both of whom have many friends and associates in the audience. Please help me thank them. It's an honor today for us to hear from an extraordinary hometown talent, a man who has given voice to storied heroes of our civil rights past and connected them to current events and the enduring struggles of today. It is our shared history, and no one tells these stories better. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome best-selling author, prize-winning journalist, acclaimed biographer, and cultural historian, Wil Haygood. Joining Wil on stage today is another hometown talent and treasure. Please welcome Wil's friend and our friend, Larry James. Gentlemen, the stage is yours.
All right. Last night I had the pleasure of introducing Wil, and I did it something like this. There are two introductions that need no introductions. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rolling Stones. Ladies and gentlemen, Wil Haygood. Vanity Affair. There's another book that Wil has authored. It's a book that he's done for the Columbus Museum of Art. Vanity Affair has listed that book as one of the 10 top art books of the year. And I quote, "There have been few moments in history of art and letters as profound and enduring as the Harlem Renaissance, which became the first collective salvo in the history of America to herald Black experience. Cataloging the paintings, the photography, the contemporary documents, and other phenomena from the era, Haygood, preeminent historian on Harlem and its roots, bring the movement, which marks its centennial this year, to life, celebrating the Black artists who lit the torch." Haygood writes, "The men and women who made art that was so often so potent, it forced America to take notice." Wil, how did it come about? Why did you do it? And just take us through that journey of...
I had written this book about Thurgood Marshall called Showdown, and I was given a talk at the Lincoln Theater, and Nanette Macy Junes, CEO of the museum, and Bill Connor and you had a meeting of the minds and said, well, wow, Wil has written several biographies about major American figures who have crisscrossed into the realm of the Harlem Renaissance. And that would be Sugar Ray Robinson and Adam Clayton Powell, Sammy Davis Jr., there's another one who I'm leaving out. Sugar Ray, Sammy Davis, Adam Powell,
and
Thurgood Marshall, all were either touched or were greatly influenced by the Harlem Renaissance. And so, and also, especially with the Adam Clayton Powell book, he was married to Hazel Scott, who was a jazz pianist who was around during the Harlem Renaissance. And so, to unravel her life, I flew to Paris. Had to go to Paris. It was April. I just made sure that my publisher knew that I couldn't finish this book unless I went to Paris in April. And over there, I was able to track down some of the Harlem artists who had worked with Hazel Scott, and that was really amazing. And then And then I was at the Boston Globe when that book was finished, and I came up with an idea to write a 3-part series on some of the figures who were still around from the Harlem Renaissance, and this was in the mid-'80s when I wrote that 3-part series. So then to be approached by the museum to curate this show seemed like a dream come true, and because it really utilized a lot of things that I felt very passionately about: art, artists, music, pictures.
So Wil, this is the book. It is a final product, but Wil, talk to us about, you had not curated before. What did you do? How did you get the interest to find the pieces to suggest to Nanette to put in this exhibition that's coming in October?
Mm-hmm. Well, being a newspaper man, I'm pretty savvy at calling experts and asking them their advice. So I would call somebody in Chicago or St. Louis who worked in a museum setting, and I would say, hey Fred, this is Wil. I've got myself in a pickle. I told some people that I knew how to curate a museum exhibit show, and I feel that my back is really up against the wall, and I don't want to make a fool of myself, so send me some things, some notes, and what I should look for as I'm traveling around the country. And they were kind enough to do it. And then from there, actually, there's a great museum staff, they help. And, from there, it was just my talent that kicked in, my eye that kicked in, and if I would be at the Smithsonian looking at 50 prints of something, this looks good, and I want this. I don't want that, I don't want that, I want that, that looks good. And it just sort of built up, and it really just took on a life of its own. You will find that the exhibit is going to be heavy on writers because I'm a writer, so that's okay. Langston Hughes he's in the exhibit. When I was a kid, I used to go to the Columbus Public Library downtown, and I would read about Langston Hughes, and he became one of my heroes. And then there's Mr. Chester Himes, who was an involuntary guest at the Ohio State Penitentiary. And while he was in prison, he wrote some of the Harlem artists, letting them know that he wanted to become a writer. And so I won't say that, I learned as I went. I did learn as I went about this process, but there was also a whole lot that was built up inside of me already about art and about Harlem. In the book I wrote, it's really a nonfiction sweeping saga about the Harlem Renaissance. I did not want to write the kind of book where you go to the museum and then you'd see some writing on the wall about the picture, and then you look in the book and you see that same writing in the book. I did not want to waste the reader's time that way, and so I did what I do best, which is tell stories. So I selected the artists that I like and wrote stories about them, about their lives, their journey, many biographies. I think that's what really makes this book, if I may humbly say, rich. It is not a museum catalog, it is a real book.
Thank you. You've been a part of this whole Harlem Renaissance movement that we've put forth here in Columbus. And when you look at this movement and you look at what the museum's done and you look at this publication, what do you hope people take away from it? You once said, as you were growing up, if I can get to the library, I can get to South Africa, I can get to Paris, I can get to London. What do you hope people take away from these writings and these experiences?
Yeah. We're in a tough moment in this country right now when it comes to race. There's no doubt about it. We are stopping brown kids at the border. If those kids were blonde, blue-eyed, we would not be locking them up and separating them from their families. And I think what the artists did in the 20s and 30s and 40s is that they were not afraid to speak out. They let their art speak for them, let their poetry speak for them. And the title of this book is I Too Sing America. So just think of those little kids locked up in a cage is what they're trying to say to the world. You know, I'm with my mother, and where my mother goes, I go. So I too now sing America. Even if they weren't born here, they're with their mother. And, you know, we really, I think, lost our way in that sense, and that we aren't looking at, you know, what the Statue of Liberty really meant. You know, it's like a us versus them, you know, and if it's a child who's trying to speak to the rest of the world and they can't find their mother, and that's heartbreaking. You know, there are, you know, more people not in the arts than there are people in the arts. And so that small clique of artists, writers or painters or singers, you know, they feel that they have an extra duty. And I think that's what the Harlem Renaissance, you know, it wasn't really when it started a Renaissance because nothing had come before it. It was an original, astonishing movement that woke this nation up.
Okay. When you, shifting gears to Tigerland, what do you see along those same lines as the importance or significance of this book at this time about an all-black high school on the east side of Columbus, and you writing it at this juncture?
Yeah. This is a book about a high school segregated in 1968. That summer, of course, it was very painful in this country. We had lost both Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, and people were heartbroken. And Jack Gibbs, the first African-American principal of a high school in this city, looked at his student body and said, look, we can rebel out of anger, we can walk out, we can protest, or we can knuckle down and try to do something special. And they started winning on the basketball team, and they reached the tournament, and they played a team, Toledo Libby, and they were up by 1 point, and Toledo Libby had the ball with 7 seconds, and they're dribbling down the court, getting ready to set the final play up, and the Libby player shoots, and the ball hangs on the rim, like, 3 seconds. The ball just hangs on the rim. And I was in Toledo about 8 months ago, and there was a big audience much like this, and I said, one of the reasons I've come here is to thank the Toledo Libby players for losing that game, and because history would have been different and I might not be working on this book. I don't know how many Toledo Libby players in the audience like that, but they won that game just by 1 point, and then they went on to the state tournament, and they won that. And then 55 days later, the underdog ragtag East High School baseball team went to the state championship game, and they won that by one run. You know these great sports movies that we see that involve race, like Remember the Titans and Friday Night Lights and Blind Side and Hoosiers, in a way. These are all stories that we are very fascinated by because we live in a sports-mad nation. And yet this story got lost. I mean, nobody wrote about it. Nobody cared about it. 10 years on, 20 years on, 30 years on. Now it's 50 years on. And here's what happened. 4 years ago, after I finished Showdown, it takes like a year, from when you hand a book in to when it starts showing up at the Barnes & Noble. And so I'm on the phone with my editor after I finished Showdown, and he says, "So, Will, I have your manuscript. I went through it, and I want to say, it's flawless, ain't it? There's nothing for you to do, right? I mean, I've about put you out of business, right?" And of course, that really wasn't the case. I get it back, and it looked like somebody spilled blood on it. It's got all these red marks, and I'm mad at my editor for like a week, How dare him? But, I could tell that he still loved me because he said, "Okay, what next? What do you want to do next?" Which is always music to a writer's ears. So I said, well, there are two ideas, Peter, that I'm thinking about. And I'm thinking about one about the movies in American history and certain movies and how those movies can tell the story of the country. And he said, oh, okay. And he said, and your second idea, what's that? And I said, well, there's this school in my hometown I'm kind of thinking about. I said it was all-black school, and the school doors opened in 1968. King and Kennedy had been assassinated, and the team won the state basketball tournament. 8 of the 12 mothers of the players worked as maids in the city, and then the day after basketball season ended, and then they start the baseball season, and they have mismatched uniforms. They don't have a dugout. They sit on folding chairs, and they reach the state tournament, and they win 8 straight games. During the season, they had a 5-game losing streak, but now they're in the tournament, and they win 8 straight games. And also, the school sent more students to college that year than ever before. And my editor said, when are you starting on that book? And so I said, wow, Peter, it is a book to you? And he said, Will, yes. And so I said, well, I'll start working on my usual 20-page book proposal tonight. And he said, Will, I don't need a proposal. Just start on the book. And so I did, and now here the book is.
So, what were the benefits of a segregated East High with a principal like Jack Gibbs and what he meant and how he went about transforming the school?
Mm-hmm. Well, school teachers in this city who were black were, recent college graduates who wanted to teach, they were directed toward Champion Junior High or East High School. Black teachers were. It wasn't right, of course, but that's the way it was. And so at East, you would have the best of the best, the cream of the crop, a teacher who couldn't get a job at West, but maybe they were a mighty fine chemist or a mighty fine mathematician. But West didn't want them, North didn't want them, South didn't want them, so they landed at East. And so that is what that world of segregation created. Everybody had to live within it, yes, but they also had to rise within it, and they did, to show the world. And Jack Gibbs was passed over twice to become the principal at East High School by 2 white men. He almost left the second time. He was so heartbroken. But his wife told him to stick it out, and he did. And on the third time, get this, on the third time, Jack Gibbs had played football at Ohio State. And he came off the bench in the Michigan game and got an interception, and they went on to win the game, and he was a walk-on football player. He became an instant legend in 1954, Jack Gibbs. So when his coach, Woody Hayes, heard that he was going to quite possibly be turned down a third time for the top job at East High School, Woody, bless his heart, went over to the school board and said, put my man in that job. He deserves it.
I want you to talk about, there is a scene in the book, they won the second year basketball state championship, and Eddie Ratliff grabs the players and said, go find your mothers. Talk about the mothers and their importance.
Yeah, most of these mothers now were born in the South, and so all of them actually, nine of the 12 mothers on the basketball team who had sons on the basketball team were born in the South, and they were 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls when Emmett Till was murdered in 1955 for whistling at a white woman in Money, Mississippi. So these women were happy to flee the South. They were happy and to land up north, better opportunities. And one of the mothers who just, she touches my heart to this day, Lucy Lamar from North Carolina, Georgia, and her husband stayed down south, and so she was a single mother, and she suffered terrible migraine headaches, and she hopped on the bus every day, and she rode the bus to Bexley, where she worked as a maid. So one day her son, and Dwight Lamar, came home and said, Mama, the coach at North High said I have to cut my afro, and that was a point of pride, that was a point of cultural pride to have a nice afro. And, he said, Mama, I just don't want to cut my afro. And his mother, Lucy Lamar, a maid, who the only thing she could do to help her family was hop on a train, a one-way ticket, and take her and her 3 sons north. So Lucy Lamar looked at her son and said, I did not leave the South for you and our culture to be disrespected. And she said, son, if you want to keep your afro, your mama's going to stand with you. So Dwight Lamar, who we were all with last night, went to the coach, who was white at North High School, and said, sir, my mama said I don't have to cut my afro. And that's not going to work in my family. She doesn't want me to cut my afro. And the coach told Dwight Lamar, who was the leading scorer in the city, you're kicked off the team. And I'm sorry, there are a lot of parents around the school who think that afro represents some form of militancy and black power. And so a week later, look at the symmetry of this book, please. A week later, Jack Gibbs and Doc Simpson at East High School go to visit in Dwight Lamar, and they say, hey, we heard about what happened, and you're going into your summer. We don't know, what you'll do, but you're a very gifted basketball player. And if your mother should happen to move to the east side, into Poindexter Village where the rents are very low, you would certainly be welcome at East High School. And now, in those days, no school principal or school teacher wanted to be charged with tampering, so they could just mention it. If you would like to think about it, we're there for you. And so, in Dwight Lamar's mother had an uncle who lived on the east side in Poindexter Village. And so that's where they moved. And Dwight Lamar was the missing link almost that year. And he went to southwestern Louisiana. Now, get this. North did not want him. And he became a first-team college All-American. In 1974, the 5 first-team college All-Americans were David Thompson of North Carolina State, Doug Collins of Illinois State, Bill Walton of UCLA, Eddie Ratliff, Long Beach State via Columbus East, Dwight Bo Peep Lamar, University of Southwestern Louisiana, via Columbus East.
I got one more question because we'll have to get to questions here in a bit. But, last night we hosted many of the families and the players. What did you take away from the gathering? What would one see and embrace from the gathering last night? And so before that, if you have questions, why don't you go to the mic this time as Wil finishes this question. Last night, those men coming together and families.
They too, in their own collective way, sang America. Just like in the Harlem Renaissance book, I too sing America. They had white coaches and white teachers who loved them, who would reach in their pockets and do anything for them. And some of those people were there last night, and you could just sense the love, and you could just sense how their beautiful pride, their cultural pride in who they are. And this nation tries to rob black people of dignity so often. Look at the man in the White House attacking black athletes because they want social justice. That is as wrong as the day is long. It just is. That's just wrong.
Thank you. Couple of comments. We'll move into the audience. It is a tradition to take questions. We hope they're not speaking questions, narratives, but they are in fact questions. Otherwise, we will cut you off. And I've given you 2 extra minutes to go to questions. So, John?
John Brody, thank you. Please feel free to refashion this question however you wish. You travel a lot, you've seen a lot of Columbus, you've seen a lot of the country. How is Columbus doing compared to its past, compared to other cities, compared to your experiences?
These people who are speeding around on these scooters like, like moving Walking Dead. It's like a shock to my system. Like, man, what are you doing? You're out in the middle of the street. Move, man. Whose idea was that? I mean, God, it's it's like, man, I'm sick of them already. I see them out the rearview mirror. There's one over there, and then they're laying down like they had a heart attack, like little ugly bites. I mean, so that, I'm sorry to go off on a tangent. Maybe I'll tell Mayor, get there. I'm gonna see him tonight. Hey, Mayor, come here. But, there's a lot that I think is, wonderful about the city, that has improved since when I was a little kid. There was no Mayor Michael Coleman when I was a little kid. There was no Larry James when I was a little kid. There was no Angela Pace when I was a little kid. And so, a lot about the city has improved, but that the state voted for this nut in the White House, it just baffles my mind. I'll quote the former president, Obama, who has said, we've seen too much craziness already. I mean, it's scary to wake up every day. So I hope that Ohio gets its political act together for the midterms. I really do. Franklin County has always led the way, though, as far as sanity at the polls. Very proud of Franklin County.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Tony Teague Bell, and I don't know if you remember me well.
I do, Tony, hi.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to try hard not to cry, because your book, Showdown, really inspired me to dig deep and think about what real sacrifices Thurgood Marshall and people like him really made, and the risks that they took for freedom and dignity and the right to be treated as equals in this country. And all of your writing is inspiring to me, but the interesting question I have is, how in the world do you do all this research and tell such a glorious story? I mean, I do laugh and cry, and then I have to go look up legal briefs, just to make sure I understand the fullness of what you did. But I think I remember you saying you research and you write for a good 10, 12 hours a day. But how do you not get stuck? And how do you not get angry? How do you manage to tell such stories of hope so that, people want to keep reading?
Well, thank you, Tony. How do I not get stuck? It's called being on deadline and not having a steady paycheck coming in. That helps. I just can't afford to get stuck. I just can't afford that. Is what I do is look for these, stories, and that people haven't told before. I think that's why I had this idea to go find this Butler, these are really universal stories, and that people can snatch and hold on to. I mean, and two, I tend to write books about people who I look up to, for some strange reason. I'm not going to write a whole 450-page book about a villain. I just don't want to live with a villain for 4 years. I just don't. Somebody once asked me, how do I choose a subject? And usually I will have two people sort of sitting on the couch, and I'll think of myself walking down the hallway, opening my door for 4 years every night, and can I smile when I look at that person on the couch? And I remember when I was thinking about my book about Sammy Davis Jr., and I was also thinking about Nelson Rockefeller, great liberal governor out of New York City. And then I said to myself, I'm walking down the hallway, I'm unlocking my door, and I open it, and there's Nelson Rockefeller sitting next to Sammy Davis Jr. Who do I want to hang out with? And, and so nothing against Nelson Rockefeller, but Sammy just seemed a little more hip.
Yes, next.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Grace Hunter, City of Columbus Mayor's Office. I'm a proud graduate of East High School class of 99, and I'm also the daughter of the late Dean Francis, who was class of 69, and he was head of the drum line. In your book, do you talk any about the music and just the overall culture and pride within East High School?
I mean, you are going to love this book. To have asked me a question like that. I mean, do I talk about the music? I mean, there's a scene in the book, and I'm going to tell you the scene. I shouldn't, but I'm going to tell it to you, where they're at a game, and they're quiet, and Jack Gibbs gets up, and he's going over to a student who has been yelling. And, has he been yelling too loud? Is Jack Gibbs angry? So Jack Gibbs picks up a bullhorn, and everybody is nervous looking at him. And Jack Gibbs hands the bullhorn to a student named Chris Dixon. And he says to Chris, "It's time to do your thing." And Chris Dixon takes the bullhorn, and he starts singing this epic East High fight song. I went down to the river, oh yeah, and I started to drown, oh yeah. I started thinking about them tigers, oh yeah, and I came back around, oh yeah. You're gonna love this book. I got that all throughout the book.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Aubert-Thomas. I'm Vice President at Philanthropy Ohio, and I can't wait to read the book and see the exhibit. And we're going to be hosting 150 institutional philanthropists from across the state in October at the museum for our welcome party so they can see this exhibit. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, wow.
Can you talk about connections to today's local artist community here in Columbus? And do you see using the arts for social justice as something that translates from the Harlem Renaissance to now?
Yes, it has been thriving. What Larry James and the entire museum has done in this moment, I think, is that they've lifted up these artists. That they brought them out of the shadows. A whole lot of people didn't know their names, didn't even know that they were here, and they've been made to feel welcome. They've highlighted their genius, be it in music, slam poetry, music, dance. It's just been an astonishing revelation, I think, to various groups here in the city to see artists who haven't been recognized and who have the talent and the skills to highlight the legacy of the Harlem Renaissance. It's just been a beautiful thing. It really has. It's just been astonishing. And I think what's going to happen in the fall, October, with this exhibit, I really think is going to be a unique national moment in this country's fabric, because this is an epic show. It is dazzling, and it really is going to be unique. Heck, I'm getting fitted for my text now.
And let me just say this. I want to thank GCAC and Tom Katzmeyer and his team and the overall Columbus community. To date, we've raised $230,000 towards this effort. We have a few more dollars to raise. It has been extraordinary, and what Tom, Nanette, and I, and Susan Bradford at the Lincoln came up with is we are employing artists of color, and they're being paid, and their talents being showcased. Thank
you. Yes, my name is John McKnight. My wife and I both grew up here in Columbus in more white neighborhoods. And from 79 to 82, she was bused and went to East High School. It was forced desegregation busing. Neighborhood I lived in, I was not bused. And my observation, I don't know if it's correct, but it seems to be that my wife and her friends that were bused to East High School maybe are a little bit less prejudiced now than some of the friends that I grew up with that weren't bused. Columbus City Schools stopped that busing program after several years, so I don't know if they thought it wasn't a good idea. Do you think that forced busing, the forced desegregation, helped? Is it a good thing, bad thing? Just a curious question.
Yeah, me or Larry?
You.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That case, the school lawsuit, that case that was filed here, and it went to the federal courts, and then it was appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. A lot of people don't know that. So East High School winds up at the U.S. Supreme Court. There's no doubt. I mean, I think that, as Thurgood Marshall told us, integration, it was the law of the land, school integration from 1954. The fact that cities and townships did not abide by that edict was unlawful. But I think there's a richness when blacks and whites and Asians, people from all races have an opportunity to have lunch together. Jack Gibbs had a program at East High School where he would reach out to a white suburban school. Northland High School was the school that he started with, and he would have the student body come and visit East High School for a whole day. And then later that year, East High School students would go visit Northland. So I found out about that story when I was working on this book, when I was working on Tigerland. So I called a school principal at Big Walnut High School, and I said, hey, I would like to repeat this program that Jack Gibbs did. So I would like some of your students to come over and spend a day with at East High School. And so they're going to do that Friday. And some Big Walnut High School students are going to come over to East High School Friday, and I will be speaking to both groups. And I know somebody's going to get something rich out of that moment. I have no doubt about it.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Keisha Gibbs, and I'm the manager of the Martin Luther King Library. So I have the honor of seeing all of the great people that have come from East High School and the great students that attend there now. And I just wonder, what role do you see this book playing for youth in our young minds, and what things can we use it for the education system?
Well, first of all, make sure that you have a whole lot of copies of Tigerland at the library.
You don't have to worry about that one.
Okay. Love you for saying that. Okay, yes, I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
It's funny. I ran into my dear friend Greg Dodd here. He's here. Ran into him in New Orleans at the American Library Association, and I was down there talking about Tigerland. And I ran into him early one morning, like 7:15. I don't know what he was doing up that early. He was up to get breakfast. So was I, grits and bacon and eggs. And I remember one of the first things I said to him, now, have we got enough copies of Tigerland on order at the library? He said, don't worry about it. It's all taken care of. He's a man of his word, so I know it is. Yeah. I think, the thing that I love about these two teams, basketball and the baseball team, champions, is that they were champions before they picked up the basketball or the baseball bat. They had some kind of moral moral direction that was inside of them. And, you know, it was just very beautiful that they knew to stick together. They didn't get in trouble. They stayed eligible. You know, and so students or kids who are going to be coming through the library to read Tigerland will hear a story about kids just like them, 15, 16, 17 years old, who had a purpose, And sports was a way, if you're from a family that doesn't have a lot of resources, sports is a way to get a scholarship too, and so these players stuck together. They're all still friends. I really think, all of these guys still love one another. That to me is the real power of this story, that yes, they were athletes, but they were also just good kids who wanted to respect their community and their elders, and I really couldn't be more prouder as a writer to have given them a story to take with them now. It's what I do, and it's my Valentine to them and to the city.
Thank you.
Next one. And while this next question is coming, today is also Will's birthday.
Thank you, Mr. Haygood. My name is Eric Davies. I guess I'll start off by saying that I'm the proud parent of a senior at Miami University who is also studying as part of her degree journalism. So I hope she gets a chance to hear you speak someday. She's also a product of Columbus City Schools, which I'm very proud to say, and it also breaks my heart to see the school ratings come out this week and see Columbus City Schools get an F and so many schools around us getting A's and B's in other communities. And so I'm wondering if your next book will be what Columbus City Schools and other urban districts can do to get an A, and knowing all the bias and the criteria itself in school ratings, but also just the poverty, the racism, and all the determinants of good education that we're facing and the many hurdles, and what your thoughts are as an educator and a journalist. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that yes, when I landed, I went over and picked up the newspaper, which is now $3. $3 for the Dispatch. I said, whoa, wow, yeah. Maybe this is a misprint. Yeah. Had to go to the ATM, I need some ones, God dog. I think my man Gary Kiefer is here, maybe. Oh, there he is. Hey, Gary. He's a great journalist, Gary Kiefer. He's at the Dispatch, but he can't make the $3 go away either, I don't think. But, schools are just very, very important in our society. Teachers are very, very important. Libraries are very, very important. I just don't know how to resolve, all of the thickness that happens to be going on in the school system. I know one of the answers is not N-O-T, not to arm teachers anywhere. Never.
Yeah. I think with that, we're going to conclude the question and answer. One more? Okay.
Thanks. Greg Brown with the Graham Family of Schools. Hey, Mary. And I want to give you a birthday present, Will. You came and spoke to us at the Charles School a few years ago, right after the Butler, and you gave a wonderful, inspiring talk to our kids, all 400 of them. And it was at the Brentnell Gym.
Yep, I remember.
And at the end of it, you were egged on to take a 30-foot jump shot in that auditorium. And you stood back, dribbled a few times, took a deep breath, shot that ball 30 feet. It hung in the air for about 3 seconds, wondering whether it was going to, and it fell right through, swished. Yep. And you got a standing ovation for that. And I want to know, I have 2 questions. Is that when you got inspired to write about East High School? Because you were not far from it when you made that shot. And the second thing is, will you come back and talk to us at the school about this new book?
It's all you have to do is ask me.
Will you come and talk to us?
I will.
Thank you.
I'd be honored.
There's one other thing I'd like to say before Mindy takes off, and that is Nanette, Macy June, and Tom are spearheading an arts initiative to raise funds to support the arts so we're not collectively begging. So what you see this year in the richness of art, we can afford to put on arts education, inspirational programming, universal, irrespective of the zip code.
On that note, thank you, speakers. I've been so looking forward to this forum, and I don't know about you, but it certainly didn't disappoint at all. Let's go ahead and thank GCAC and Puffin Foundation West for their support today. And our speakers, Wil Haygood and Larry James. And thanks to all of you for being here. We hope to see you next week.